Ivy Slater, and you're listening to Her Success Story Podcast, a show where gutsy businesswomen share their success journey. Hi, it's Ivy Slater. Thank you for joining me today. I have a great guest who shared such insight. I was so excited to connect with her. Kris Putnam-Walkerly is a trusted advisor to the world's leading philanthropist. For over 20 years, she's an ultra-high net worth donor, foundations, Fortune 500 companies, celebrities, activists, wealth advisors have sought her advice to transform their giving and catapult their impact. Now, we have just been talking about with an enormous amount of nonprofits every year. Her success story and our podcast has focused on nonprofit giving for 6 weeks during the holiday season. So I thought Kris could have such wonderful, amazing insight. Her recent book, Confident Giving, is a sage advice for funders. And I think I actually might have messed up the name of the book. So Kris, come on and tell us a little bit about your book. And then I want to get into the impact that you're really making with these massive foundations that include Smucker's Foundation, that you have touched so many dozens of foundations that have made an impact that have been in the million to $1 billion numbers. So let me stop talking about you and let's really hear what's going on.
Well, thank you so much, Ivy. It's wonderful to be here. And you did get the name of the book correct, but it was my first book. So my first book is Confident Giving, Sage Advice for Funders. And my second book, which just released in 2020, is called Delusional Altruism, Why Philanthropists Fail to Achieve Change and What They Can Do to Transform Their Giving. And so I do work. I advise ultra high net worth donors and leaders of grant making foundations, corporate giving programs, really any kind of donor who wants to make an impact with their charitable giving, from some of the biggest ones in the country and in the world, like the David and Lucile Packard Foundation, the Walton Family Foundation, down to, entrepreneurs who are trying to make a difference and give back to their community.
So first of all, my first question is so obvious. It's like, how did you get into this? It's a unique niche. It's an amazing piece of insight. How did this start for you?
I was always, and I don't know why, but always, as I'll say in high school, interested in, foreign policy and what was happening around the world. And I ended up, when I graduated from college, I moved from Indiana to San Francisco and began working at a nonprofit organization that was trying to help and support people suffering from human rights violations in Central America.
Okay.
And that got me kind of started on that trajectory. And I ended up getting a master's in social work, thinking that I was going to manage and run nonprofit social service agencies. But while I was in grad school, I took classes on program evaluation, and really was intrigued by the value of assessing the impact of a nonprofit's success, the programs, what's working well, what's not working well. So then when I graduated, I decided to work at Stanford University. And I was working on a project where I was an evaluator of youth and gang violence prevention programs all throughout California. And this was
And that is a massive impact.
Yes, exactly. Yes. So, right. So youth violence, obviously a really important issue, and gang violence prevention. And so this was a whole big initiative funded by one foundation, the California Wellness Foundation. And they were kind of at the forefront back in, this is mid 90s. I'm dating myself, but they were really trying to help everyone understand that youth violence really shouldn't be seen as a juvenile justice or criminal problem. First, it should be seen as a prevention problem, as a public health problem. And how do you prevent this from happening in the first place? Not how do you lock up these kids once they've committed some kind of violence? And so I thought to myself, if you're a funder, if you're a philanthropist, you have money, like that's what you have to start with, which is great. But if you're really smart and thoughtful about it, you bring in the right experts and the right the right folks to help advise you on what the right use of the funding is, the best use of the funding, you can really make a difference. And so then I went to work at the David and Lucile Packard Foundation, which is the family foundation of Dave Packard of HP, who of course is no longer alive, but his foundation is quite large. And that was a great experience. And it really kind of solidified that I loved philanthropy. And then I began consulting on the side for Charles Schwab's Family Foundation, and realized I loved consulting, and decided, hey, I'll just, I'm 30, I'm single, I'll go out on my own, and, who cares? I can always get a job. So that was 20 plus years ago. And I've been advising funders ever since.
So let's talk about, because, I love it in the name of your book, you talk about transforming change in giving.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
so
yes.
How do we look at transforming change? What does that look like?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. So I think, there's all kinds of ways to solve problems, but I think what's most important is to do that in a way that creates what I call transformational change or transformational giving. So thinking about how do you create lasting change? So instead of a Band-Aid solution, how do you create change that lasts and that transforms people's lives for good? So here's an easy example that I think everyone can relate to. Often, at the beginning of the school year, there's lots of projects to stuff backpacks with school supplies, right? And so because a lot of kids don't have school supplies, and I'm a parent of 10-year-old twins, these things are expensive. I regularly spend $200 just buying the basics on the list every fall.
And that's a tip of the iceberg.
Oh, yes.
As a parent, yeah. My kids are thankfully older now, but I remember those lists and
Yes.
the shopping, and $200 is truly the tip of the iceberg.
Yes. And that doesn't include the backpack, right?
Correct.
So, yes, filling backpacks with school supplies and giving them to children who need them is really important, but it's a Band-Aid solution, right? What I think is more important is helping their parents get well-paying jobs and get all the resources that they need so that they can afford to buy their own backpacks and school supplies for their kids. That's really the more important impact.
Right. And Kris, that goes along the lines of, the adage expression that goes, you can give a man a fish to eat, or you could teach somebody to fish,
mm-hmm.
and they could feed themselves and their families for a lifetime.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And you can also listen to the person who can teach you how they need to fish. So by that, I mean, I think as funders, part of the transformational giving, I think, is also transforming ourselves as donors and how we give and how we think about giving. Yeah. And so it's common, really, for wealthy people who are successful in other aspects of their life and business or whatever, to sort of think they have the solutions to then impart upon the nonprofit organization because, you were successful in, hedge funds or whatever. Therefore, how the best way to end homelessness. And so, but the reality is, while you, the donor, might be super smart and successful, that doesn't mean you necessarily know everything about, and certainly not about a lot of these social issues and problems that are, that have been going on for decades or maybe centuries. And so it's also really important, I think, to listen to the nonprofit organizations that you're supporting, those working in communities, working in grassroots organizations, because, really they're the ones that are living and breathing these issues and challenges and, having a pulse on what's happening in the community. And so they might know, quite frankly, the better way, chances are they do know the best ways to accomplish something. Yeah, they need your resources and they need your support and partnership. But I think listening and following really the needs of the nonprofits is a really important skill for any kind of donor to have.
Yeah. So in running now for 20 some odd years, a consulting company that who knew? It's always a surprise. I'm a business owner.
Mm-hmm. I know.
Sometimes. So what are some of the, on the other side of this, what are some of the things that you have seen in working with your clients of helping them transform, helping the mindset of giving transform?
Yeah, well, it happens in all kinds of ways. I mean, sometimes I'm working with, families who, kind of came into wealth unexpectedly, either because they inherited money or because a business sold for more than they could imagine. And so with that comes wealth, which is great, but also can come a lot of guilt and a lot of other negative feelings that get caught up with that. And so, one donor who, her husband sold his business, they went from like financially fine to uber wealthy, like over in a week. And it was really stressful for her because it changed how she felt about herself, how her friends, looked to her and kind of spoke to her, and people began treating her differently. And she was very clear, like, don't have pity on me. Like, this isn't, of all the problems in the world, suddenly being really wealthy is, not high on the list. But that doesn't mean that it's not hard and not emotionally challenging and difficult. And what that means, why that's a problem for philanthropy, is you want people to feel empowered, feel excited, feel like have clarity in what they're trying to accomplish with their giving, and the right tools and advising and strategies to get there so that they can have the greatest impact with those philanthropic dollars. And if people are depressed or fearful or overwhelmed, then chances are they're not going to be, very philanthropic, because just by the nature of their experience. And so I think, part of it is helping people recognize that, here you are, like wherever you're at, this is where you're at, right? So take what you have and the assets you have and the luck or the, whatever it is, and think about, what are you trying to accomplish with your giving? Where are you right now? What have you been blessed with? And what can you do? How could you activate those resources or your knowledge or your connections to people or your expertise to create the greatest impact on whatever issue or cause you care about?
And as being a business owner yourself for 20 some odd years, you're dealing with not just high net worth, but high influence, which comes with a whole nother level of how you show up and you run your own business. What are some of the lessons you've learned?
Well, honestly, the lesson I've learned is really to be yourself. I mean, to me, it's, I could be working with a billionaire, but they need what I bring to the table, really, in terms of like, yeah, they might be super successful or have a lot more money than I do, but they don't have the philanthropic expertise that I have. And so I really think it's important as a consultant, as a business owner, to recognize yourself as a peer to the people that you're working with. Because, otherwise it's easy to get intimidated, or it could be easy to get intimidated, but it really doesn't make any sense, because, we're both bringing expertise and assets and knowledge to the table. And there's ways that I can help my clients that I'm not saying they can't do, but if they could have done it by now, they probably would have, right? I mean, for all of us, right? You're a business coach. I'm sure, a lot of the things that we're coaching our clients aren't rocket science, but sometimes it's helping them see things that they can't see for themselves because they're too in the weeds, or they don't recognize that they're not alone in facing these challenges, and just learning that they're not alone is really helpful. Or, you're just helping them to stay accountable to the kind of change that they're trying to create. And so, so I think, obviously one needs to show up as a professional, but I think one also needs to show up as an expert with confidence and, seeing yourself as a peer to your clients.
Now, you have, I can't not ask this question at this point in time. 2020 has been an interesting year.
Really?
To say the least. So in navigating 2020, and yes, nonprofits have really have felt this year. As a leader in philanthropy, how have you helped your clients? How have you helped, in the messaging you're putting out overall, navigate this year forward, and the depth of the nonprofit struggle in their leaders?
Yeah, so a couple things. One of the things I began advising my clients immediately was really to seize this time as an opportunity to transform and to innovate. And because, it often takes a good crisis to be able to allow us to free ourselves and to do things differently.
By the way. Touche. And do me a favor. I know I jumped on you there. So I really want you to repeat that, because what you're saying is really, really important.
Yeah.
It takes a good crisis too.
Yes, it takes a good crisis to get people to change and do things differently and be more innovative and try new things. I mean, so in philanthropy, there's often a lot of restrictions that funders put on the nonprofits. So these are things like, complex application processes that nonprofits have to apply for, right. Lengthy times, like you apply in, March and we'll make a decision in August about funding you, or lots of restrictions. The money can be used for a tutoring program, but it cannot be used to pay the personnel costs of the tutors. I can't make this up, right?
I know.
Really restricting exactly how the money can be used, what it can't be used for, and then all kinds of reporting on the back end. And so it is not uncommon for a nonprofit to spend, let's say, $3,000 of their own time putting together and reporting upon a grant proposal that is for $10,000 worth of funding. So they spend $3,000 doing all this stuff that's really not helpful. Anyway, so there's a lot of that. And so what happened in philanthropy at the beginning of the crisis is all of that dropped. Not for every funder, but for a lot of funders, they just gave up. They kind of recognized immediately how stupid that was, right? So the money had to get out the door quickly. We didn't have time for applications. Some of my clients just issued checks to, safety net organizations, the food banks, other organizations, and called them and said, hey, there's a $10,000 check here waiting for you. You're welcome to pick it up anytime, right? No application, no reporting. We'll call you when this whole thing is over and see how you spent the money, and we'll write the report for you. All of these changes. And it took a crisis. This is stuff that people have been advocating for, nonprofits have been advocating for a long time. And, some funders had been improving their practices and streamlining, but a lot of them, held on to these, policies and procedures that they had for no particular reason. It is not the law, but they did. And so, that was important. And I think now, helping them recognize, well, if you could make all of those changes so quickly while you all were like fleeing to your homes, you're making these home offices, you probably could do this like when things get back to normal and maintain it. And so I think that's really important. But also, for me, a lesson, and I'm sure you've seen this with your clients, is the stronger an organization was entering this crisis, I think the stronger they are getting through it and innovating and coming out of it. And I think that's true for philanthropists. It's true for nonprofits. It's true for business owners. If you have, systems, a strategy, good communication vehicles, your finances, you have all this stuff in place, and you can make quick decisions and you have good advice, that I think those people were able to act quickly. They already had the technology. They were already using Zoom, there's a lot of funders, and I'm talking people that are giving away tens of millions of dollars a year, that had no way, after we all went into lockdown, they had no way to get money out the door to help nonprofit organizations, because they issued all their grants with paper checks that were physically locked in the office, that required multiple signatures, physical signatures. And so the whole world of philanthropy can be divided into two groups: those who had paper checks that got locked in the office and they were in a panic because they really wanted to help these nonprofits and communities. And those who had, were smart enough to figure out ACH payments or, some kind of electronic payment, which is not that complicated, but you can't necessarily do that quickly on the fly. You know what I mean? So just that basic technology investment in themselves was hugely helpful to a lot of foundations to be able to quickly get money to the organizations that needed it.
So let's talk a little bit about, because you and I have had the opportunity to chat about this in earlier conversations, the importance of a plan. Mm-hmm. We talk so much about business of, you want to have a business plan, you want to have a strategy, you want an action plan. There's all these things. Now, where does this come into play in philanthropy, in nonprofits, in big foundations?
Well, it's really the exact same the exact same thing. I mean, I think anybody, myself as a basically independent consultant to, the Gates Foundation and everyone in between, I think needs a strategy, which is basically simply like a decision-making framework. It's basically saying, what are we trying to accomplish? Okay. Let's say in the next 12 months, where are we today? Like literally. And how do we get from where we are today to where we want to be a year from now? And what are the, 3 or 4 most important things we need to focus on? Who's accountable for those? And let's get moving, right? It does not, and I think what slows people down, and all of that is important, and it's especially important in a crisis because you want to have clarity in what you're trying to accomplish, and you want to align your team, especially as everyone is literally like, running off to their homes and suddenly sitting at their dining room table going, now what do I do? You want people to have clarity on what is an organization you're trying to accomplish, what's most important, and what's everyone's role in driving that. And during a crisis, especially like this one, that strategy can't possibly remain intact. So it's far better to have a plan, a strategic plan, a plan, whatever you want to call it, that you can modify and adapt and tweak or, abandon pieces of it and add new pieces to it as a crisis hits than it is to have nothing, because when you have no plan, I think it's easier to be panicked. It's easier to feel overwhelmed, not knowing what you're supposed to do, kind of paralyzed in fear. But if you had a plan entering into this, your business plan, your strategy, then you could literally pull it out, take a look at it, say, okay, what no longer makes sense? What do we need to abandon? What needs to maybe get modified but still makes sense is important? And what do we need to add? And you just kind of fix it. You change it like in a couple of hours, not, spending a year to come up with a plan.
Right. So what I'm hearing you say is so true. And as you said, this is across the board in business and philanthropy in so many ways. They say, a dream is a goal with a deadline. Okay. A goal is achievable when you have a plan of action. Yep. Okay. Mm-hmm. And when you have a plan and you have any kind of crisis situation, you can then go back and adjust the versus start scrambling.
Yes.
And be that I don't know what we should be doing right now moments.
Yes.
Which does not serve a philanthropy. It does not serve a business.
No. Yeah. And I think we also have to, change our mindset because, I think especially right now, I mean, it's very uncertain times, right? I mean, as we're recording this, we've just had presidential elections in the United States and, the outcome is still, finally kind of getting solidified. But we've had COVID, COVID was peaking and then it was calming down. Now it's peaking again and things are closing. There's a vaccine on the horizon, but no one knows how quickly anyone's going to actually get it. Right? There's all these unknowns. And so it's very easy, I think, to kind of step back and say, whoa, life's too uncertain. I can't possibly plan ahead with all this uncertainty. Let me just wait till things get back to normal. And the fallacy is that, yes, the future is uncertain, but it's no more uncertain today than it was last year or last century, right? We can't predict the future. And, there is no new normal coming around the corner because there never really was a normal. So I think we have to change our mindset. And rather than the idea of an unknown future paralyzing us, allow it to free us and have it be a very freeing experience because really it allows us to create a plan, to plan ahead 6 months, 12 months,
right?
Knowing that we're going to things are going to change, like knowing the world's going to change again, but that we get the opportunity to adapt it and pivot and, be flexible. And as you mentioned, it's far better to move on something than it is to be flailing in the wind.
Exactly. And I know whether it be a financial plan, a marketing plan, a business plan that should encompass a financial plan, a marketing plan, et cetera, in philanthropy, a giving plan, goals and objectives around the giving. One of the things I adore about you is that you are always building forward. So something you developed during this COVID experience was a guide and a resource. And first of all, I want to highlight you for and call you out in your greatness that you didn't take this time, right, as things are shifting and changing in the world, to sit idle and wait and see. You went into servicing your clients to the best of your ability, as well as creation mode. And out of this creation mode, share a little bit of what you've developed.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's very kind. So I created this guide to address this exact problem of funders really feeling like, they need to kind of wait and see till the crises, end, which they never will. And so I created this guide. It's called 8 Things Every Philanthropist Can Do to Change the World, even when the world keeps changing. And so it's available for any of your listeners that want to download it for free. If you just go to the website 8things.org, then you can download it for free. And it provides really practical tips, I think, to really, change your mindset, recalibrate your timeline, and, quickly create a plan that you can count on even when the world all around us keeps changing.
I love it. I love that. And I call you out on your brilliance for actually addressing what is going on and giving all of us the ability to be able to give, make an impact, some on a smaller scale, some on a bigger scale, some on a grand scale. But as the whole globe looks at this, if we all find some scale to give on, that
Absolutely.
impact will be great.
Absolutely. I mean, we're all philanthropists in the sense that any of us that give of our time, our resources, but also our expertise, through writing or through your podcast. I mean, this is a gift you're giving. All this knowledge that's freely available for people, I think, is really important. And we all, we need to recognize that that's part of giving and contributing back. And, and we're all philanthropists, and we all can make a contribution.
I love that. Kris, how can our listeners know more about you? There's the 8 things they could download, which I love. And what's the best way for connecting to follow you?
So if you go to 8things.org and download the guide, it's links right there to my website, which is putnam-consulting.com. And so you can connect with me there. And there's all kinds of links for, of course, all the social media. And then if you're interested in learning more about the book, Delusional Altruism, because a lot of the ideas I've shared on this podcast conversation are from that book. The book is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And there's also a link to that on my website as well.
Lovely. Listeners, Kris is an amazing leader. She's been running a consulting company for 20 some odd years. She has an amazing insight, brilliance. And one of the things that I really resonate in what you said is we don't all give the same. Even giving of ourselves, our time, our areas of expertise make an impact. So everybody can learn from today in how to show up, as well as we didn't even touch the iceberg of how you're doing this while you're a mom of twin girls. So you want to be following Kris, you want to be staying in touch. Thank you, listeners. Remember to hit subscribe at the bottom. We come into your inbox every Monday morning with great new insight and information. In addition, leave a note on what resonated with you today. What was the biggest piece of impact that you're going to take forward? And in the reviews, write a review. The more stars, the merrier, especially during the holidays and post-holidays cheer. Thank you for joining us again today.
Need your approval anymore, 'cause I've got mine.